I think there are some others coming, but we'll crack on just to keep everything nice and tight. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us for today's webinar. For those who don't know me, my name is Julie Petty, and I am the General Manager for Policy and Projects with Seafood Industry Australia. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners and custodians of the land on which we meet today. I'm joining you all from Yagara land, and I pay my respects to their elders past and present, as well as emerging leaders. So these Sea Safe webinars are meant to be short, practical and action-focused sessions designed to keep safety top of mind for everyone who works in the commercial Australian seafood industry. These are part of a hopefully long series as we convince other people in industry to help us deliver these. And the webinars are here to showcase some key safety topics and basically provide some of our audience with, I guess, some real world voices from within the industry and learnings that could be applied across numerous, if not all, sectors. Today's session is designed to run for about 15 minutes of core content, which we'll record, and then about 15 minutes of Q&A, which we won't publish as a part of the recording, just to ensure everyone can speak freely and pepper our guest speaker with lots of questions. On that note, I'd like to introduce today's speaker, Greg, who has been working in the safety and operations leader role within Petuna. He has extensive experience across high-risk industries, including aquaculture, mining, and cement, I hear recently. Greg's work focuses on moving beyond compliance-based systems to embedding practical, behaviour-driven safety approaches that reflect how work is actually performed, which is that key thing we all struggle with, is the recommendation says this, but in reality we do this over here. He's got a strong interest in bridging the gap between work as imagined and work as done, and using on-ground safety interactions and open conversations to build trust, improve systems, and support long-term cultural change. So that's the focus of today's webinar, behavioural-based safety changes in the commercial seafood sector. So hopefully we'll have a drum roll now for everyone, and we'll pass across to Greg. Don't forget to unmute yourself, Greg.
Will do. Thanks for that introduction. Did you want to start this as questions or?
No, I think we'll hear from you first, and then because that's the bit we'll record, and then at the end we'll cut out the question section of the recording so that everyone can speak freely.
Okay. Without going over some old ground, I guess I just wanted to talk a little about the way that we've introduced safety interactions into our workplace. These are basically morphed over time, similar to the safety observations that may have been run at different companies, and they've come about over the years with things, overlapping ideas through psychology, industrial safety, quality management, and so forth. And I guess their early roots sort of started back in William Heinrich's day, back in the 30s, where he basically said if you could basically, with his findings, were showing that there were more incidents that occurred due to unsafe behaviours as opposed to unsafe conditions, and that sort of then morphed into something in the 50s and 60s when the behavioural psychology creeped in. And I guess B.F. Skinner was one of the people that was bringing that into the workplace for the first time and sort of influencing and reinforcing that feedback, I guess, from people's behaviours. And then in the early 80s and 90s, you had the behavioural-based safety that came in through E. Scott Geller as one of the main people turning that behavioural theory around, and had some structured observations and things like that. So it's really a morphed safety observation, but the emphasis is on going out and having a chat to the workers out there and fully understanding what they're doing. And that's obviously a powerful tool in itself, whereby you may have procedures sitting in the background, but when you go out and actually verify that, they can be quite a diverge between the two. And I think there's a prime example of that in a recent court case that happened in the Port of Auckland, where their CEO has now been fined and prosecuted for his failure to cover off on his due diligence responsibilities. And this is coming from a CEO who was very safety proactive, but he still got fined and prosecuted due to the fact that a person's been killed in their workplace doing the wrong thing. But no one was checking to verify that people were working to the procedures. And I guess that workers, as imagined, as opposed to workers done, had drifted so far apart, and people hadn't been sort of measuring or checking in the right areas. And I guess the CEO, so the buck stops with him, and he's copped a $130,000 fine personally, plus $60,000 to the Maritime New Zealand. And the Port of Auckland has also been slugged with a fairly significant fine as well. But this is the first time that a CEO in New Zealand's in a big corporation that's actually been fined for failing their due diligence. And really it comes back to that, not going out and verifying that things had drifted, from what he perceived as people following the procedures, and but the way that the work was actually done was significantly different. And that turned out to be a fatality, and pretty hard to defend that in the court. So I guess the major findings for us is that we've rolled this out at Petuna and started off with our executive team. So we had them going out and conducting safety interactions with the workforce. This is a fairly powerful tool in itself, where the workers actually think that the big bosses are actually interested in what I'm doing, and they're actually learning stuff about how the work is done as well. So that's covering off on some of their due diligence responsibilities, but it's also throughout those conversations, and those conversations could go down various rabbit holes depending on the type of work they're doing and the conversation that unfolds from there. But some of the findings have been pretty good as well. So, and they're just really a byproduct of the conversation. So really it's going out there and observing those behaviours and making sure that they are doing the right thing, and 99% of the time they are, but there may be that 1% where they may need just a little bit of a correction, and getting that commitment from the workers that they will change their work behaviours and follow the appropriate procedures. So I guess you can't emphasise enough that importance of going out there and verifying the work as imagined as opposed to the work as done. So that's pretty much it. Obviously the second component of that then is cascading that down to the workforce. So you have the peer-to-peer aspect of that, which is probably where the real rubber hits the road and the most powerful component of that. And we're just in the process of doing that at Petuna. So that'll take a while to roll out and really entrench. But from other places where I've rolled this out, we've found a significant drop-off in incident rates. And a lot of that is around having that safety at the forefront of mind, as opposed to, just thinking about it when you're in the midst of your job, which is sometimes too late for some.
Greg, would you mind going through in a bit more detail at Petuna how you, I guess, create but then also manage those safety interactions? So you've mentioned about observing work, but also sort of having conversations rather than policing, and more understanding why people are doing stuff that might be different to the procedures that they're told to do?
Yeah, sure, Brodie. Well, part of those conversations, or part of, I guess, the training for the leadership group, is just going out and having them go out with a keen interest and asking, in-depth questions as to why they do the things they do, and getting an understanding of that why, and so, especially if there's been a drift away from the procedures, to say, well, okay, then if you're working outside of that, and the worker may come back and say, well, this is an easier way of doing it, it's also safer, and that may mean a tweak to the procedure. But if that conversation hadn't taken place, that procedure would have just stayed there as it was, and the workers would continue to drift apart from that procedure. So just by having those observations, discussions, interactions with the workers, they're getting a more up-to-date feedback on what actually is occurring in the real world, and then from there the leaders can go back and either make those adjustments to the procedures to reflect that if it's still safe to do so, or there may be some conversation needed with the workforce to fully understand why they're doing it the way they are. But if they're not having those discussions, and someone may have put that procedure together, 5 or 10 years ago and expecting people still to follow that, but things may have changed in the work environment, or the conditions have changed since that procedure was developed. So there may be valid reasons at that time why the procedure was done the way it was, but it may not be relevant in today's workings. And once again, having those conversations and doing that verification sort of keeps that aligned. Hope that answered the question.
Are you looking to sort of set up, I guess, a regular review process or something so that you can make sure you're keeping that live to some extent for the company?
Yeah, one of the ways we're doing that, Julie, is actually got a data spreadsheet where we're capturing unsafe behaviours versus good behaviours, unsafe practices, and so building that database, it gives us a bit of an understanding of where the gaps may be, and from there we can set up some focal points. So if we're finding that there's a number of people not adhering to, say, PPE, for example, but getting an understanding of why they aren't wearing their PPE, and there may be some valid reasons there. So if we find there's a trend forming in any of those, we can put that together and actually run some specific toolbox sessions or training around the requirements too, or actually understanding if there's a need for different types of PPE that may be better suited to the job that they're doing. Because we've found a few times there, even just a simple thing like the example of, okay, some of the work areas are mandatory hearing protection, but some of the people with prescription safety glasses were struggling to wear them because they were uncomfortable. And just through a conversation on that very subject, we found that, okay, we may need to get a redesign either in the earmuff that we were providing or the safety glasses that we were providing to our employees. And that seems like a very simple fix, but if that conversation hadn't taken place, people would probably still be struggling with it, complaining, not wearing their PPE when the boss had his back turned, and that drift would occur just in that simple example. So that's some of the things that we're trying to do to try and capture those in our spreadsheets, and then sort of developing some specific training topics around those.
Do you feel that those open conversations that the executive team is having with the workers, that it creates sort of a better level of trust between the two of them, so they're able to speak more freely about potential hazards, but also solutions, I guess?
I think in all honesty, to start with, there's probably an element of suspicion as to why they were coming around. I think the worker was a little bit apprehensive to start with, but once they understood the why and that the execs were out, and once the execs explained that they were there to try and listen to them, assist them where they could, listen to their issues, and more importantly act on some of those recommendations, I think then that element of trust was certainly bridged. But over time, that's got better. We have now rolled this out to middle management, so now middle management are conducting these as well. I think that level of trust that will increase even greater, I think, when the workforce are doing the peer-to-peer sessions, and then they will have that, by the time it gets to the workers doing with the peer-to-peer, they will have already seen them in action with the middle management and also the upper echelon as well, so they'll have a good understanding of what the intent is, as opposed to just waiting to catch somebody out. It's more of a learning opportunity, a way of fine-tuning things. So I think that's where we're really powerful.
Are you hearing good feedback from those on the ground about both the process and then the changes that they're seeing?
get some feedback now on the operators are saying, well, okay, this is probably better than waiting for our monthly safety committees to raise some of these issues. They're fixed in the moment or raised in the moment, and hopefully the smaller issues can get dealt with quickly, and there may be some longer term actions that are required there, but I think with our reporting system as well being bolstered, those actions aren't getting forgotten about, and that sort of holds people to account to action those in a timely manner.
Thank you.
Perfect. Sounds good.
Thank you, James, Brad, Greg, Bridie. Take care, everyone.
Thanks,
guys.
Nice to meet you all.
See you,
Bye.
Claire.
Okay.